Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chapter 7 Security, Technology, and Tools. Today, we'll be talking about intrusion detection systems, prevention systems, as well as other security tools. By the end of this material, we should be able to identify and describe the different categories and models of intrusion detection and prevention systems, IDPS. We should be able to pretty much describe the approach as well as implementation approach for IDPS. We should be able to define other things like honeypot, honeynet, and potted cell systems, as well as go over some additional security tools that applies to the field of cybersecurity. So every organization needs to pretty much protect their assets, and in order to do that, they rely on managerial controls, technical controls, and some operational controls, as we have covered. It is very essential to have the proper technical controls in place. The implementation of technical controls are usually driven by managerial decisions, and after that, we get into the operational controls that help ensure that the technical controls are always effective. Part of those technical solutions that are being used at the technical control stage includes the implementation of intrusion detection as well as intrusion prevention systems. And intrusion detection and prevention systems occurs pretty much an intrusion occurs when an attacker attempts to gain access into an organization's information systems. And as you can see, intrusion detection consists of procedures and systems that identify system intrusions. These are controls and well, these are tools that are in place with the primary function of just identifying intrusions. They do not prevent, but rather they just identify and send some sort of alert or any type of notification to let whoever the administrator is that some sort of intrusion is happening or is undergoing, or maybe a system is under attack. We then have the intrusion prevention system, which consists of pretty much procedures and systems that identify intrusions as well. But the difference with intrusion detection is an intrusion prevention system have the capability to stop an attack, stop an intrusion, or any kind of malicious activities related to the tool or that falls within the tool's capability. Intrusion prevention pretty much consists of activities that deter an intrusion. Then we have the intrusion reaction, which pretty much is the actions an organization takes when an intrusion event is detected. So let's say an intrusion detection tool is able to identify or notify the administrator of an organization that some sort of an intrusion is happening. Maybe someone is trying to break into the internal network by trying to pretty much brute force a website password, or even trying to infiltrate the firewall or things like that. And the IDPS, the IDS, that's the intrusion detection system, were able to send a notification to the system administrator. The reaction from the organization, that is the steps it's taking to pretty much make sure such attack doesn't succeed, is part of the intrusion reaction. For intrusion prevention system, when it detects that something is going on, it will, even though it will notify the administrator, it will still go ahead and take some sort of a corrective action, or rather, it will ensure that the intrusion doesn't take place by doing certain things. Then we have the intrusion corrections, which are pretty much Let's say an intrusion has is successful, so a network has been infiltrated, some sort of attack has already happened in the sense of an intrusion, maybe data has been stolen and things like that from the internal network. Intrusion correction involves pretty much all the activities that are in place to ensure a complete restoration of operation to a normal state, as well as identify what has been missing, what has been or stolen, as well as where the source is and what type of attack was implemented, and all those details that will narrow down as much as needed to identify the attack, as well as evaluate the damage that has been done. Now, many intrusion detection and prevention systems enable administrators to configure the systems to notify them directly or via alert. I mean, lately, as we are progressing, we are seeing text messages, notifications, but it's normal to see emails, pagers, and any form of notification. But the idea behind it is just an administrator should be able to instantly know if something is going wrong, or rather, an intrusion attempt is going on. Also, intrusion detection systems can actually detect a violation of its configuration that is, it might not necessarily be an attack, maybe it's just a new update was released, the system was not updated by administrator and things like that, and it's getting quite old to the point where there are certain vulnerabilities that definitely are in place, and an update is definitely needed, then you that will be considered a violation of the intrusion detection system. And a lot of IDPS systems have the capability to kind of activate an alarm or send a notification and just let the administrator know that there is a need for an action. They can also be configured to notify an external security service or an external entity. Just think of a home alarm system. That is also an intrusion detection system. Not really an intrusion prevention, but a typical home alarm system is considered an IDS. It doesn't really stop someone from going into your home. It doesn't do anything to stop the attack from happening. That is your items being stolen when someone breaks in. But rather, what it does is it alerts. Maybe it starts buzzing some sort of a siren, extremely loud to a point that your neighbors will actually decide to take a look into it. Or it might send a notification to the cops or whatever monitoring service you have. Let's say you have ADT, an ADT system as your home alarm, then maybe that home alarm system will just send a notification to the ADT monitoring team, where they will then contact the maybe police department or whatsoever is needed. If it were a fire alarm, then it will be to the fire department. So basically, that's how an IDS is. An IPS, the prevention system, works similar to IDS, but it also has the capability of stopping whatever attack is going on. And we will see this in depth in the subsequent lectures, in the subsequent slides. So as we mentioned, IDPS, they pretty much detect and deal with preambles to attacks. When it comes to intrusion detection, as we mentioned, their primary purpose is to identify or report an intrusion, not to take an action, and they can quickly contain attack um, by sending the notification and then someone taking an action, not by themselves, but rather sending and someone takes an action. In addition, IDS and IPS can be used to collect data, and that data will allow the organization to examine what happened after an intrusion and why it happened, where did it happen, what is the source, and things like that. What's the motivation? I mean, putting a lot of data together will definitely make different sense. And They usually serve, that's an IDPS usually serve as a deterrent by increasing pretty much the fear of detection. That is, think of an alarm system where at home, similar, just the same IDT I was telling you about earlier. Think of it, maybe an intruder decide to break into your house, and all of a sudden an alarm starts buzzing, and that intruder doesn't really know how to shut the alarm off. They A lot of people will decide to pretty much run. Any smart intruder will decide to run because they know that some sort of certain type of action will definitely be taking place if they do not leave on time. That could be a deterrent. It's like having a camera out of put in place, like a CCTV camera outside your house. That could also serve as a deterrent because it increases the fear of detection. And within organizations, having an IDPS can help management with quality assurance and pretty much continuous improvement and continuous monitoring. That is in the sense of day-to-day activities that are being logged to the IDPS systems can be captured, as well as organizations will be able, with an IDPS or IDS, whichever one, an organization will be able to identify loopholes in the sense of intrusion and then try to close them. So let's say an organization hardened their firewall. By hardened the firewall, I mean they have really secured the firewall. But whoever did it kind of did a terrible implementation where they didn't start their first access control list by denying all traffic and allowing by exception, but rather they just decided to be manually blocking traffic, blacklisting rather than whitelisting. And by doing so, which is a very tedious job, by the way, that is not a good implementation. When you're implementing hardware rules, when you're implementing firewall rules or any type of rule, it's always better to kind of deny all traffic and only allow by exception. That is your ability to pretty much, rather than blacklisting sites, you will be whitelisting. And so, yeah, from that example, let's say some administrator did a terrible configuration and decide to be blacklisting individually. An intrusion detection will be able to help an organization identify loopholes or identify the vulnerabilities. Now, it's not a vulnerability scanning tool, but rather any attempt to access a certain point will definitely show that there is a weakness on that certain entry point. There are pretty much different types of IDPS. We have the host-based, we call them the HIDPS, and we have the network-based. Starting with the host-based, basically what the host-based are is a type of IDPS that resides within a single system. So they pretty much operate as a host-based system. An example of that is think of your laptop and you install maybe an intrusion detection system. That means that intrusion detection and prevention system only protects that laptop, and it will not really notify you when someone try to attack or maybe try to um, intrude into your home network, but rather whenever someone tries to get access to your laptop that has the IDPS, then you will get a notification. As for the network based, this is installed at pretty much to scan the entire network, where it is usually installed at the entry point of the network, in the sense of before anything goes in or goes out of the network, it will pass through the HIDPS. Sorry, it will pass through the IDPS, and the entire network traffic will be examined. Looking at the image, when you take a look at the first, so we have the internet, right? Basically the untrusted network. And then we have an external router, which is serving as the gateway. It could be the router that Comcast or whoever it is your service provider provides you. A good implementation of a network-based IDPS will be to install it before your internal network, and after the router, which means every single traffic coming in after the external router provided by your ISP will be scanned, and any traffic going in will also be scanned. And this also allows you to see any external source that is trying to access your home network without your awareness. I mean, it would be really odd if you see someone definitely maybe you are hosting a web server at home and it's only meant for teaching at Marymount or something like that, and then all of a sudden you're getting traffic from different sources that you do not expect. So things like that. Whereas for a host, the host could be a server, it could be anything, but it's just a standalone system, and that IDPS is only installed within that host, and it only examines the data as well as files stored in the host, and only alerts based on the changes to that host or attempts to access that host. Looking at the network intrusion detection and prevention systems in depth, as we mentioned, they only focus um, NIDPS only focuses on protecting network information assets, so it works entirely on a network scale. And we can have pretty much multiple types of network intrusion um, detection and prevention systems, starting with maybe on a wireless level. So you have something that monitors the wireless network rather than have it localized in such a way that it's only cable. So everything going through cable is what's being scanned now. In this case, it will mean that every single access to your network wirelessly will also be scanned, and that's another implementation of our network intrusion detection and prevention system. Then we have the network behavior analysis, which looks more into pretty much the network flow, right? The traffic flow on a network, and it basically monitors the behavior of the flow. So if something is considered an outlier, then it will definitely notify. An example of that is, let's say you are now in California and you use your debit card or credit card or whatsoever in an ATM and then remove some sort of cash. And 2 minutes later, you are getting another charge, an ATM withdrawal in New York. There is another ATM withdrawal in New York with the same type of card. That is definitely an outlier. It doesn't, there is no way one can be in, there's no way one can be in California and 2 minutes later they are in New York. Well, unless you are the Flash, but that is an outlier. So those are things that can definitely be captured as part of a network behavioral analysis system. Some advantage of network-based IDPS includes they pretty much reside on a computer or appliance connected to a segment of a network. That is, they have their own dedicated infrastructure, and they have their own dedicated appliance, and the primary role of the appliance is just to monitor the network, and they enable organizations or individual or anyone pretty much non monitor the entire network on a larger scale. Then we have another advantage, which is network intrusion detection systems and prevention systems look for patterns within the network traffic to kind of see what is out of normal. That is, and any little disruption can actually trigger an alarm. And another great advantage is network intrusion detection and prevention systems are usually not susceptible to direct attack, and that is because they are very hard to be detected by attackers. As a result, it's really good at capturing data without really being identified. The Another one that is not here is the fact that network IDPS can be installed in a network segment. So pretty much rather than monitor the entire network, you can decide to monitor a certain aspect of the network that is extremely sensitive and vital to you. Some disadvantage is the fact that they can become overwhelmed by network volume, and that is if you have a network intrusion detection system that is not strong and powerful, capable of handling all the network traffic and network volume that goes in and out of the network, the device can become overwhelmed and it will not be processing enough traffic in the sense of not scanning enough traffic to see what is going in and out, and might actually fail or even result in false positives and failed negatives. So that is one of the advantage, and it definitely requires access to the network. So basically, you cannot put a network intrusion detection system to function without giving it access to the entire network to be monitored, which in addition means within an organization, if you are monitoring the entire network using a network intrusion detection and prevention systems, then at least you should have some sort of a notification or anything to let your employees know that, okay, everything within this network is being scanned. Implementation is usually done using a special TCP/IP stack, and by that is it means the network intrusion detection prevention systems also follows the TCP/IP stack to be able to scan it. It could operate at any level, could be at the transport layer, the network layer, or even the data layer, where it's scanning traffic data only at a certain layer. For wireless network intrusion detection systems, one of the issues associated with it include the physical security as well as sensor range, or even the access point, the location, and things like that, as well as cost. Because wireless devices depends on uh, highly relies as well as function accordingly, depending on the range they can cover. There could be limitations and blind spots to the wireless network intrusion detection and prevention systems coverage. Next, we are going to look into a host intrusion detection and prevention system. Unlike the network IDPS, a host IDPS only resides on a particular computer or server, as we discussed. And some of the pretty much advantage of network intrusion detection systems over a host intrusion detection systems include the fact that network intrusion detection systems can usually access encrypted information traveling over a network, and they usually make a decision based on the network, whereas the host intrusion detection prevention system only works only works based on configuration or change management, in the sense that it didn't really look into the encrypted data information, but rather they work according to a certain configuration that is in place, and if it's altered, then something is wrong. However, some advantages of the host based include they can detect local events on host systems. So if your primary concern is just to focus on a single system because it's the most sensitive system, then a host intrusion detection and prevention system is definitely the way to go. They also function because they function on the system. Most of the time, you'll find them a host based working on an unencrypted traffic, or maybe they have the traffic has already been decrypted. As such, there will be less processing and ease identifications as well as detection. there is limited impact on host based regarding network traffic as well as network protocol. And because as we mentioned earlier, they work on the principle of configuration and change management. This means that they can detect pretty much inconsistency in how applications and systems, programs, as well as settings on the certain systems are being used, as well as stored in the audit logs or even the system logs. Some of their disadvantage is because they work only on the system, it means any vulnerability on the system can be inherited by the host base. And if the system is the target of an attack, it means the host based IDPS is indirectly also a target of the attack. And they can actually, due to their processing requirement, host base can actually affect the performance entirely of a system. So the host base is running and you're trying to use that exact system, they will result into a lot of overhead as well as a lot of processing. And they can be very hard to manage, especially in organizations with a lot of hosts where you have each single one running on a single computer. But then on the bright side, we have different implementations these days where you just install a client on this host and it is scanning and monitoring on in the background where a centralized server is somewhere and you monitor the systems directly from the centralized server. As as I mentioned earlier, it could take a lot of process and performance on, from the host, but it can also take a large amount of disk space that is available on the computer. That is because it's building logs, it's building all these reports constantly. That could definitely take a certain amount of space. And again, it's susceptible to some denial of service attacks or pretty much any attack that can be implemented on the host system itself. Looking into pretty much the detection method and response behavior of IDPS. First, we have the signature-based detection, and this type, the signature-based usually examines network traffic in search of patterns that match known signatures, as well as so there is already a known signature, and if something happens, then it matches it with the already known signature to see if that it compares with the already known signature to see if there is a match, and then it flags it if there is. This is a similar scenario of how antiviruses work, where if there is a virus comes in new to your computer, then the antivirus will quickly scan it and then it will look into the repository or wherever the virus, maybe virus can or whatever database is being used to store the signatures. And once certain properties are identified, then the antivirus will be able to flag the new virus coming into your computer as a malicious malicious code. Signature based are usually widely used because many attacks have clear and distinct signatures. So if something is asking to send to copy all your emails or maybe copy all your passwords or data records or whatsoever and send it to some random unknown server in God knows where out of the middle of pretty much no place. That is definitely something that is out of normal. And because we have all these identifiers and properties, signature based is still one of the most widely used detection method. However, some problems with pretty much using a signature base is that new attack patterns must continually be added to the database of signatures. So any zero-day attack or some sort of a new form of attack that has never been done before will not be identified because there is no signature related to that that exists. And as such, this pretty much approach can be slow and attack can because attack can pretty much involve multiple events, you will find some attacks actually escape detection. We also have the anomaly based, which is also called the behavior based detection. And what it does, the way it functions is it collects statistical summaries of pretty much observing traffic known to be normal. And when measured activity is outside pretty much of the baseline parameter or clipper level, parameter and clipper levels are within the certain range that is accepted. And when things occur out of the ordinary, then it gets flagged and it's being detected. Similar to the example I gave you with the card. If the expectation is you live in California and you make a charge in California, then the expectation is for the next 30 minutes, you should not, it's not even possible for you to be in New York and make another charge, but then all of a sudden, less than 30 minutes, there is another charge to that card. That is an anomaly and it will be detected. Another is pretty much another property of the anomaly based detection could be they can detect new types of threats as well as new types of intrusion and attacks. That is because, unlike signature based, they do not depend on comparing whatever is happening with a certain um, parameters, no, with a certain properties or similar signatures, but rather there is just a definition of instances or rather parameters, like we mentioned, the clipper level, that when something happens out of that range, then it is an anomaly. So as a result, new attacks can be easily detected than a signature based. But the issue with that is it requires much more overhead and processing capacity. So you need definitely a bigger system to do an anomaly based detection than you will need for a signature based detection. That is because with signature based detection, it's just a comparison and which can happen real quick. And with anomaly based detection, it means it constantly it's running to make sure that everything happens within that parameter. And another thing related to anomaly based is the fact that it can generate a lot of false positive. It could be that you are the flash and just made a transaction in California and within 2 minutes quickly became the flash and turn on your superpower capability and you're just in New York in 2 seconds and make another transaction and it will flag it. If you're still the right person, it's still a legitimate transaction, but it will be flagged and that will be considered a false positive. So anomaly based detections can generate a lot of false positives. We have the stateful protocol analysis, sometimes abbreviated as SPA, but the way SPA work is they pretty much process of it's pretty much a way of comparing known normal benign protocol profiles against observed traffic. So unlike signature based, similar scenario, but the difference is that it compares with what is considered normal, whereas anomaly based detection goes out of the abnormal. This looks into like the normal profiles against observed traffic will be compared, and that is how it flags. It stores pretty much and uses relevant data detected in a session to identify intrusions involving multiple requests and responses. And this means it allows pretty much a better detection special. This pretty much, yeah, it allows IDPS to better detect specialized multi-session attacks, also called deep packet analysis. That is based on this property, it can really go into layered or pretty much multi-session attacks. And that is what we refer to as deep pocket, the ability to go out of outside the surface and go in depth and scan every single thing and understand that yes, something is definitely going on before making a conclusion. Some of that disadvantage is because it's very analytical, requires a lot of steps, a lot of processes, then it usually is very complex and also results in a lot of processing overhead. And it can also fail, just like the anomaly based detection, it can actually fail to detect intrusion unless a certain protocol violates the pretty much fundamental behavior that is supposed to be in place or that may interfere with normal operations of the protocol. We also have log files monitors, just pretty much uh, logs, but often referred to as LFM. And what happens here is it the IDPS reviews logs files generated by servers, network devices, and even other IDPS for patterns and signatures. And patterns that signify pretty much attack may be much easier to identify when entire network and its systems are viewed as a whole. LFM requires considerable resources since it involves the collection, movement, storage, and analysis of large quantities of log data. And when we look into the response behavior, so now we understand the detection method, how IDPS detects intrusions. Now, when an IDPS detects intrusion, what happens next? How does it respond? That pretty much IDPS actually classify response as either active or passive. An active response includes collecting additional information about the intrusion, modifying the network environment, taking action about the intrusion. That is more of the IPS, that's the intrusion prevention, as well as yeah, taking action, stopping the intrusion, and all of that. The passive response includes things like setting up alarms or notification, collecting passive data, um, so kind of like a home alarm where it doesn't take anything. It's not an act. It doesn't provide an active response, but it's a passive device, so it can only set off an alarm or pretty much send notification. As a result, it usually generates results. Also, reports that will provide additional information. That's one of the response methods. A failsafe where it automatically just sets off the um, lock. Imagine if your ADT system at home has a certain capability where if someone maybe breaks into your door or whatsoever gets into your house, in addition to having an alarm system, it will actually just lock every single exit level and then the intruder will be boxed in. That is a fail-safe approach. You have situations where an intrusion prevention system will have an active mechanism that if someone gets into a building after the regular working hours, then they will not be able to go out and they will just be boxed in. That is all part of an active response. Next, we are going to look into some strengths and limitations of the systems in general, the IDPS systems in general. And you can pause this page and read through them. I'll kind of cherry pick some and explain them. Some of their strengths, they are known to be very good monitoring and analysis systems that provides a lot of information regarding traffic flow as well as host-based information. Very good when it comes to testing security states of system configuration. They recognize patterns. When you get the chance, definitely pause this page and kind of go through each single one and make sense of it. Next, we are going to look into the different implementation strategies. But before then, we are going to just quickly quickly talk about how do you select the best or rather the right IDPS. That is keeping in mind what are the technical and policy considerations. So what are the technical requirements of the organizations and would this IDPS system satisfy those technical requirements? Same thing. What are the policy considerations? What is it that is expected by from a policy level by the organization and would the IDPS be able to satisfy that? Well, an administrator or security professional should definitely keep that in mind while making a decision regarding selecting an IDPS. So that is, what is your system or rather, what is your company environment? What are the security goals and objectives? And what are some of the existing security policies, as well as what are some of the requirements? So next, that's the organization requirements and constraints. So what are the requirements from outside the organization as well as within the organization? Could be a standard, could be there is a governing body that requires the organization to function a certain way. Just an example is there is the PCI DSS requirement for all banks to have security devices in place. Is it the same thing? And will that satisfy, will the IDPS one is going to choose satisfy that requirement? And pretty much, yeah, existing security policies. Then look into the systems, that's the IDPS product features and quality as well. That is the product pretty much sufficiently scalable for your organization or your environment? That is, will it cover everything you want it to cover, or do you need to supplement it with other things? Has the product been tested? Because you want to use something that has been tested. You don't want to be the person um, going in blindly just for the sake of using it. Um, like we mentioned, with all security tools, what user level of expertise is required because you do not want a system that will require so much time of your administrators. We all know how we do not like wasting so much time and energy on a security appliance because doing if a security appliance is extremely hard and complicated, then it means there will always be loopholes because people will not would just want to find the easy way to implement it. And is the pretty much like we mentioned scalability. So will the product evolve as the organization grows, or is there like a certain time frame that only this will be able to satisfy the organization for a certain number of years, and then we have to change it? And pretty much what are the support provision for the product? Is there a customer service? Those are really important. What is the look into the company that is providing the products? What are the future, the market trends, and all of that? Because you do not want to buy a device and then the company goes out of business, then it means you might not have security updates and all of those things. Next, we are going to look into some of the implementation strategies. So IDPS can be implemented in three ways. Could be centralized, it could be a fully distributed or partially distributed. And for centralized, it means looking at figure one, it means that all the IDPS control functions are implemented and pretty much managed in a central location. That is when you look at the um, figure one, you will see that everything is actually in a centralized location. And then the other one that is the fully distributed system is a situation where control functions are applied at the physical location of each IDPS component. So each single IDPS component will have some sort of uh, control function. And then the third one we have is the partially distributed. This combines pretty much the two. That is, it combines the centralized IDPS and the fully distributed IDPS. While While individual agents can still analyze and respond to local threats, they report to a hierarchical, pretty much central facility to enable kind of the organization to detect and control widespread attacks. rather than just in a centralized or just a distributed implementation strategy. Next, we have deploying the IDPS itself. So NIST, as we all know what a NIST is, has some recommendations for deploying a network intrusion detection system, and they give four locations for pretty much the network intrusion detection system, depending on your network. One is putting it location one that is behind each external firewall in the network DMZ. We know what the network DMZ is. That's the public facing, but behind each external firewall. So, like I mentioned earlier, the same gateway, the main gateway of your network should have an IDPS because it allows you to monitor every traffic that is coming in and out of your network. The second location is outside an external firewall. We hardly see this that much unless you own the firewall. But if the firewall is usually provided by the ISP and whatsoever, people hardly put it use location two. But if you own the firewall device and whatsoever, and that is the point where you would like to monitor it, then it's a good location to add it. Then the third is on major network backbones. That is um, pretty much immediately after every subnet, after every firewall that is, or firewall or router that is protecting a subnet. Then we have uncritical subnets like option 4, which is very similar to location for like location 4, which is very similar to location 3. These are the four recommendations by NIST, but if you want to know it in depth and read it and understand it from a technical viewpoint of how to deploy um, a network-based intrusion detection and prevention system, then I will redirect you to the NIST Special Publication 800-94. It provides the entire guidelines of a NIST deployment and its recommendation. Then we have the when one wants to deploy a host-based intrusion detection and prevention system, because it is a host-based. There's really no location-wise. It just exists in the system. The issue with this is that it can be very painstaking and time-consuming task, because imagine an organization with 100 computers or devices. It means every single device will need to be um, installed. Now, it might not be the requirement might not be to install it individually. It can be installed all at once from some sort of centralized location. Unless that is in place, still the deployment will require individual installation. And even with the centralized deployment process in place, it will require each single device to go through a certain type of installation. Usually, deployments, one of the best approach for deployment host base is you should always start deployment with the most critical systems. So always protect the most sensitive and most important asset before getting into the less important ones. We also have installation usually continues until either all systems are installed or when everything has been covered. So now that we understand pretty much IDPS, we understand their deployment and implementation as well as the control strategy. How do we measure the effectiveness of an IDPS? And usually IDPS are evaluated using four metrics, that is either a threshold, a blacklist or whitelist, as well as settings and some sort of either a code review and editing. And either of these is a way to pretty much evaluate an IDPS. A threshold has to do with defining a certain threshold that it should not surpass, or maybe it should stay within. Blacklist and whitelist has to do with kind of like listen out what needs to be identified as well as what needs to be flagged. Alert settings on how it should reply or respond or notify you, and then code viewing slash editing mostly on the host based requires some sort of identifying or determining some sort of a change in the configuration management or code or how the device is meant to function in terms of the programs installed and things like that. Most times, vendors usually provide some sort of a testing mechanisms, and that is related to a certain device based on its capabilities. The vendor will kind of provide a way to evaluate it whether it is functioning effectively or not. And because developing pretty much an effective measuring mechanism can be very tedious, this is one of the reasons why vendors that know their devices and everything has been tested usually provide a mechanism or a way to pretty much evaluate and verify that the systems, the IDPS is performing as expected. And some of the testing that are usually provided by vendors can enable an administrator to pretty much record and transmit packet from real virus or worms, as well as record and transmit packets from a real virus or worm with incomplete TCP session connections, such as missing sync packets. If you have taken the IT520, you should understand what a sync packet is when it comes to TCP handshakes. And yeah, one of the most important thing when measuring the effectiveness is always try to put the testing process to be realistic as possible, because you do not want to put something that is extremely unrealistic and then the effectiveness will not be captured or measured efficiently. In addition to IDPS, we have honeypots, honeynests, and padded cell systems. And honeypots are nothing but just decoy systems that are pretty much designed to lure potential attackers away from a critical system. So what happens when in this type of implementation is you have your critical systems that are protected by some sort of a firewall or whatsoever. They are internal. So one needs to be on the internal network to actually have access to that. Then you have the DMZ, which is the public side, where if you have a website that is meant for public, you put it in the DMZ. Now, a lot of organizations or individuals also can put some sort of a network. It's more of a decoy network where attackers trying to access the system will see that, oh, there's this, oh, the network is in place. It's right here. So might as well just access it without knowing that this is actually meant to draw attackers to it rather than them putting in so much energy to identify the real network. And there are actually some legal implications to that, which we will cover. But we also have the honey nets. The honey pots are the individual systems that facilitate the bringing in potential attackers as well to take them away from the main systems. Honey nets are just a collection of honey pots together to build the network of those decoy systems. That is the honeypots. And they basically divert attacker from accessing critical system. They also collect information about the attacker's activity. So if someone goes into the honeynet, he will be able to get the results and understand how they access it and make sure that the critical system is properly secured. I mean, or even pro, um, pursue legal um, actions and things like that. And they also encourage attackers to stay on system, I guess, on the other side without having access to the critical system, such that one can quickly um, close if similar loopholes exist in the critical system. We also have the padded cell system. Padded cell systems are also honeynets or honeypots. The difference is because honeynets and honeypots can be lax when it comes to the implementation to allow attackers to quickly access it, padded cell systems are usually protected as well. So they are protected more uh, more protected and not easily com compromised like honeynet. In addition to pretty much attracting attackers, they collect the data as well, and they function hand in hand with intrusion detection prevention systems by allowing the IDPS to get all the results. So the takeaway from the padded cells is that when you have a honeynet and an IDPS detects the attackers, some sort of a mechanisms as part of the paddle cell systems will kind of transfer the attackers into this simulated environment where they can really, well, attackers cannot really cause any harm, but they will think they're already in the network. And that is pretty much why it's called the padded cell. And in addition to all those protection at the honeypot and honeynet, there is some sort of a simulated environment that not necessarily replicates the exact critical environment, but it is convincing to the attacker that they are in the network. We also have the trap and trace, which is basically just a use of combination of techniques, different ways, different approach, reconnaissance, and things like that to kind of detect an intrusion and also trace it back to its source. When we talk about reconnaissance, it involves collection of intelligence as well as collection of data and all every single thing that will be used to pretty much trace back an attacker. Some advantage of having these in place includes things like attackers can be diverted to locations they cannot really damage, and it buys some time to administrators to decide how to respond to the attacker as well as decide on how to protect the critical system. The um, attackers can actually be easily monitored and more extensively in the sense that there is nothing of value in that in the honeynet or the paddle cell environment, but they wouldn't know, and as such, there is no nothing of value, and an administrator can actually monitor them extensively. It also catches pretty much intruders who are just snooping around to see if there's anything of value for them to pick on the network. One of the major issue with having these systems entirely revolves around the legal implications of actually building one. Depending on where one is, there could be laws that actually prohibit that along the lines of enticement and entrapment, actually. And if you don't know what enticement is, it's just the act of pretty much attracting attention to pretty much, well, entrapment is more of when someone is persuaded to commit a crime, and enticement is has to do more with if someone will still commit the crime irrespective of being persuaded or not. So when it comes to system, one could say that enticement has more to do with the act of attracting attention to system by placing them in key locations that makes it much more attractive to attackers, and entrapment will be the act of pretty much luring an individual or attacker into committing a crime to get a conviction. And this is something that has some sort of legal implications when you take a look from law enforcement point of view. I mean, even with cops, where maybe cops decide to keep a vehicle and someone steals it, that it could be legal, it could be illegal. And even in places where it's considered legal, you find these issues around some consider it to be unethical, some think it's ethical. But a major consensus is that enticement, which has to do more with just attracting attention to the system, is considered legal, and entrapment, which is making an individual commit a crime, is considered illegal. However, some see both as unethical. Honeypots and powdered cell have not really been proven to be that useful within the security realm, especially when it comes to sophisticated and extremely knowledgeable attackers. They can easily pick it up. Also, expert attackers can pretty much know and may actually become angry and then become much more aggressive. That's also another disadvantage. Now that we have covered this, we are going to look into pretty much additional security tools that are more meant for scanning and analysis. We have the scanning tools, which are usually just tools that are used to collect information that an attacker needs to launch a successful attack, or even an administrator will need to just understand the network. We have the attack protocols, which are logical sequence or steps. If you haven't taken IT on 520, you should definitely take it. We usually discuss protocols in depth, but nothing more than a logical sequence of steps used by either an administrator or an attacker to launch or stop an attack against a target system or network. We have footprinting, which is basically the process of collecting publicly available information about a potential target. Unfortunately, we live in a data analysis as well as data science world where even the most smallest data can uh, one can make sense of it. So there are a lot of public information which by themselves are not really damaging, but when you put them together, they become a big deal. That process of putting them together and that process of collecting the information includes footprinting. And an example of this will be, let's say you have, maybe on Facebook, you just have um, your birthday, hypothetically speaking, June 1st. I'm just making this up. So let's say June 1st. You just have it publicly available, like June 1st is your birthday, and everybody goes, yeah, happy birthday, and all of that every June 1st. And somewhere over there, maybe you tweeted, or maybe you even added a post or whatsoever saying something like, finishing my master's degree. Oh, thank God I was able to finish my master's degree at the age of 20. And we all know that now is 2019, which means everyone, and you made that post maybe June 27th. That is, everybody knows your birthday is June 1st. You made a post June 27th saying you were lucky to finish with your master's at the age of 20. Every single individual who is sophisticated enough, or at least even have an iota of smartness, will be able to know that, okay, whichever year it is, that is 2019, you turned 20 June 1st. That is, one was born in 1999. So June 1st, 1999 to June 1st, 2019, that is 20 years. There you have it. Someone has your birthday. Then maybe somewhere, maybe you tweeted something again, it's talking about your middle name or whatsoever. And then you also have a picture of your graduation degree with your full name in there. Um, That's it. The second thing, maybe you have a dog. You posted it on Instagram and everyone was commenting like, "Oh, he's so cute," or things like that, and you just say, "Yeah, his name is this." All these things are important data that everybody knows. because it's publicly available. However, nobody is making sense of it unless they have an agenda. Same thing, everybody knows you graduated with a master's degree from maybe Marymount University, and by just Googling you, maybe you have a web page on Marymount University that says, oh, you graduated high school, you graduated your first degree with a first degree from this university, you went to high school in this city, you went to, well, not really elementary, but maybe you went to um this in this city, and then someone will be able to go and maybe look into your Facebook and look into your friends, and they will understand like, oh, you have a lot of childhood friends from this city. One can be able to put it together that you were from a certain city. All of these things can then be used maybe to just pick the phone and just call your bank and say, maybe it's Wells Fargo, or maybe it's Capital One, whichever it is, or maybe you even tweeted at Wells Fargo and say, hey, Wells Fargo, I cannot access my bank account. What's going on? So somebody knows you use Wells Fargo. And then they just go and pick the phone and they'll call Wells Fargo and say something along the lines like, hey, I missed my card and I lost my wallet, blah, 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 blah. I'm so this person, but I do not know how to verify it. Well, technically, they should ask you for your social security number, but if you are able to maybe bypass that due to human or social engineering or some sort of mechanism, and you didn't really provide those um, social, then it means someone might be able to kind of provide the name, city, your dog's name, and whatsoever, just in the with the hopes of getting access to that. Then they request for another ATM, and the same person, the same banker might go ahead and say, do you still live at this address, blah, 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 Arlington, Virginia, 22206? And you say, yep, I still do. And then from there on, another person has your address. And they can then monitor your your mail and whatsoever. All of these are put together as a result of footprinting. That is part of all the information they provided online for free. We have fingerprinting, which is similar thing but targeted towards organization internet address collected during the footprinting phase to identify network services offered by hosts in that range. So you find maybe Google will be hard to do, but you know Google, you just go and do maybe a trace route or something like that, or even go into just ping in the google.com. Now you have the IP address, but it's the public IP addresses. Then from there you are able to pick other addresses that are within their range or the public IP addresses that they own, and then from there you do some sort of a trace route or whatsoever to locate where their servers are. And then from there you're just narrowing down a certain organization based on their IP address and where they are and what kind of services, who provides their network services, who provide their websites, who hosts their website, and all of these are part of the fingerprinting. Then we have port scanners. um, Port scanners are very important and very useful for both attackers as well as administrators, but port numbers are just ports are, if you have taken IT 520, you know what a port is. But it is this an identification for sockets that exist between the application layer and the transport layer. And they allow network traffics or protocols pretty much to go through between for application and the transport layer to be able to communicate. So let's say you are visiting a website, google.com or youtube.com, and it uses a HTTPS, but because HTTPS is an encrypted version of HTTP, HTTPS has a port number of 443, but HTTP has a port number of 80. Ideally, every single organization should try as much as possible on every single system to block port 80 because it is not safe unless there is a need for it. But port 80 should not be going in and out of organizations directly, at least at the TCP level, or at least should not allow HTTP connections internally, or even have telnet connections that are not going through on port 23 and not SSH on port 22. Port scanners will be able to reveal which ports are open within the organization or a certain device, could be a firewall or whatsoever. We have the firewall analysis tools. Also, same thing. They are meant to show which devices, which firewalls are poorly configured, and similar to port scanners, they identify ports as well as access control lists. Operating system detection tools, like the name says, they provide knowledge to what kind of operating system is being run on the is being used on the host system, on a server, or whatsoever. And every attacker, at least a sophisticated attacker, needs to know the type of operating system before they launch their attack. There was this saying before that whenever you're going to visit the dark web, you should never enlarge your screen resolution as well as do certain things that will identify what kind of operating system you have as well as the screen resolution. And you find a lot of security people hardly enlarge their browsers or whatsoever because they do not want the size of their screen to be identified just because they have enlarged something. I'll be honest, on my viewpoint, technically I have never seen something an attack just because of enlarging a screen like a browser or a file or even a folder. And I cannot think of any technical way to implement an attack, but it is possible because maybe you have some sort of, I don't know, a device that has a different kind of screen size that is unique to only that device. Then maybe it could be used to identify what device you're using, and that will means an attacker will be able to look into that device and identify the vulnerabilities that exist within that device or the brand or whatever type of device you're using. Then we have the packet snippers. The packet sniffers are pretty much network tools that captures copies of packets from network and analyzes them. If you have taken IT520, that is just something like Wireshark. Wireshark is a packet sniffer. They just pretty much go through packets, network packets, and identify what um, what type of packet is and just analyze everything around the packet, including their header, the content, the encryption algorithm that is going on, encapsulations, and all those things that are attributed to network packets. We have now completed this chapter. We were able to discuss IDPS systems. We were able to discuss the two types of IDPS, including the network-based as well as the host-based. We did look into things like signature-based. We looked into statistical anomaly-based, and what should organizations do in order to be able to select the right IDPS. Looked into decoy systems such as honey pods, honey nets, padded cell systems, and all of that. We also look into scanning tools as well as analysis tools and all things like vulnerabilities tools and pretty much tools that attackers use as well as system administrators use to be able to kind of implement attacks and all of that. This brings us to the end of this slide, and we'll get into the next chapter.